when we moved here, when our friends had come out, they'd say, "Why in the world did y'all move way out in the country?"
Yeah.
And
Town grew up around it.
and then after we'd lived here about 2 or 3 years, they started building the Will Rogers High School, and they was telling, just such a wonderful school, going to be such a wonderful school. And I said, well, I'm glad to see them build a high school, but we'll never live here. It won't do my children any good. We'll be someplace else,
Yeah, no.
Never dreamed that. And every one of them graduated from Will Rogers High School.
How did you meet Uncle Bill?
Well, he come to see Clyde, his brother, lived down there. And I don't know how come Clyde, he was living in Dallas. I don't know how he wound up down there. But he bought some land, for one thing. And he moved neighbors to us. And I knew Clyde several years. I wasn't too old when Clyde moved down there. And Bill would come down there to visit his brother. But I didn't meet him the first time. I was in Missouri going to high school when Bill visited his brother and visited Clyde. And but later on, he come back several times, while Clyde lived there. And so one time, I happened to be home, but I wasn't, I was lots of times gone, and of course he didn't come to see us. He came to see Clyde, and I met him, and then he started writing to me, writing letters, and then whenever he'd come, I would go places with him, and never dreamed that I'd marry him, because I was going with Johnson Carlyle and someone else. I'll tell you a funny story about Johnson Carlyle. It was quite a while after Bill died, not too long before, I'd say 3 or 4 years ago. Florida was up here visiting me, and I said, Florida, is Johnson Carlyle still living? And she looked up at me with a funny look on her face, and she said, well, I don't know for sure, but I think so. And I could see her face. She's wondered why I was asking about him. He came through to my mind, and I just, I just wondered. I'll tell you one thing. All of his family nearly was dead, I think, except Kathleen, lives at Finley. And I would see her every once in a while. But I've never seen Johnson Carlyle. He married and lived over there someplace at some little town. But he just happened to come to my mind, and I laughed.
The name's familiar, but I didn't.
I laughed, and after Florida's gone, and I said, I think Florida thought that I was interested in Johnson Carlyle. I said,
Wanted to hunt him up.
Yeah, you hear about things like that. No, I never had any idea, because I didn't ever intend to marry again.
Yeah. Well, how did you happen to go to high school in Missouri?
Well, see, we had that's where Mother was from Missouri. My father was from Tennessee down south, but my mother was from Missouri, and we had lots of aunts and uncles and everything, and it wasn't a high school close to us. The only way I could have gone to high school ever down there would be to get to Finley somewhere or other, and then catch in later years they had a bus, but they didn't have that until, years later.
What did you do, stay with the family?
Stayed with my aunt. Now, of course, all those older ones, that was Mother's age and all are dead and gone, but I still have cousins up there. We went up there to a reunion I went to about 3 or 4 reunions up there. But now there's so many of the older ones gone, that they don't have that reunion anymore.
What town was that in?
Well, I went to high school in Goodman, but when we went back for the reunion, that was at oh, I can't think of anything but Joplin now. It wasn't Joplin. Well, I can't think of it right now. My old timers is working, but I'll think of it later. And I still have a cousin, but that was Mother's family. Now, my father's family came from Tennessee and lived, some of them lived in Arkansas. And he and Mother lived in Arkansas for a while. And then I don't know what the reason and how come that they moved to Shakota. Now, they were married, though. When my mother and father were married, it was over close to Muskogee.
Well, you know, the Hogan boys, sure a lot of difference. You would never know they're brothers.
I know.
I used to think an awful lot of Uncle Hope.
Yeah, and he was
we
quite
had
a
good
character.
chemistry. Yeah, we'd always hit it off real well.
And then Ernest was entirely different from him, and
Uncle Cecil.
Cecil was different. Cecil was just as ornery as they come, and Arthur was still a different person. Arthur, did you ever know him?
Oh yes, he was kind of turned like Bill.
Yeah, he was
real quiet.
Quiet and real kind and good. He was really a lot better than Cecil or Hogan or any of them. I mean, he took care of his own business and left everybody alone. Let's put it that way. And when he was growing up, when Arthur was growing up, he was about 18, and they lived in Shakota, and he got drunk one Saturday night, and it made him awfully sick. You know, he went to town and got with a bunch of other kids and got drunk. Well, that was all that it took. He never did drink or anything, you know. And he never forgot how sick that made him.
Well, that's probably good.
That was a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you want to turn that off? But, sweet. I can just almost, see, I remember that well. And I remember him. He was a nice-looking guy. And he was a nice person and from a real nice family. The Millers were nice people. But, you know, Florida having, I guess, a stepdad and her mother was never around the Millers anymore, she might not have known very much about it. Now, I know they did come, some of them came to see her, some of the family. It probably wasn't the brothers of Frank, but some of them. I don't think Frank ever had a sister. I think he had 2 or 3 brothers, and I remember one of them was named Herbert, and one was named, seemed like it was Theodore.
Well.
Kind of a funny name. And his mother was a little woman, too. I remember her. And I don't know what his dad did, and what kind of business he was in. I don't know if they were farmers or what.
Was Frank a small person?
No, he was pretty nice size.
Yeah. Oh.
And a nice looking person. And but anyway, he had his brother Herbert now was taller. I faintly remember him, and I don't remember too much about the younger one. But what I started to tell you, they were Mother's and Dad's neighbors and friends in Shakota. And I have a feeling that maybe they got down there on account of Frank and Evie moving down there. and then of us moving there,
Yeah.
see. And maybe that's why the Millers moved there. See, Evie met Frank in up around Shakota. She didn't meet him down there. That's where they were married and where, and see, Florida was born before they ever moved down there. I do know that they went to Missouri to visit Frank and Evie in Florida. She was just a little thing, 2 or 3 years old. Went to Missouri to visit some of Mother's family, and he worked up there. He got a job up there and worked. And it seemed to me like it was in Joplin.
Well, thinking back, Mom, when Frank died, in Florida as young as she was, that was an awesome responsibility and a very difficult thing to try to
Now here was Evie in Florida was living with us after Frank died, see. That's what people had to do back then, Howard. Women didn't work.
That's right, they didn't work.
And the only thing they could do was get married again or live with their family. And May and Roxy were there because Tom was overseas, see, in the service. So can you imagine all of us living there? But Florida was like to Athena and I, she was like a sister. I never ever thought of her being my niece, or she never ever called us aunt. We played together. We did, just have fun playing together, and enjoyed each other. And when Evie and Mr. Randall would go any place, they'd bring her, and Mama would keep her till they got back. And then she'd cry because she had to go home. And because, she wanted to stay and play.
Yeah. I remember Mom telling about the Randall boys were pretty ornery, and Dad was off somewhere, and one of them lit a rooster's tail afire or tied a corn shuck to it, and it flew in the barn and burnt the barn down. Did you ever hear that?
Well, I know they had a barn. It burned. I kind of, a lot of those things I forget.
Oh, goodness.
But I just loved the house that they lived in down there when they lived in the country. Of course, Evie never did live, after she married Mr. Randall, they never did live in town anymore. They moved to Snow, from down there. But it had this huge big hallway, and it had porches galore. And it had this one room. It had 3 rooms over here on this side of this hallway. And what they called a hallway now, small hallways when you go into somebody's house. But this one was great wide. It seemed to be like wide as this room, probably not that much, but and it run the full course of the house. And they're open at each end, and it was
kind of a breezeway.
It was a breezeway, and that's why they built so many of them like that.
Oh,
because,
no air
see, that was cool in the summertime, and there wasn't such a thing as air conditioning, People didn't even have electricity or have fans. And now Mr. Randall did, after they moved to Snow, he had a generator or whatever you call it.
Yeah,
And
light plant.
Yeah, and they had electricity and a lot of things like that. But when they lived down there in the country, they didn't. And then over here, they had, on the other side of that hallway, they had the living room, big living room, and with fireplace and everything, and then a kitchen right next to it. And then the dining room was across the hall. Now that would be unhandy today.
Sure would.
But that's the way their house was.
Yeah.
Of course, their kitchen was big enough to eat in, but when they had company and Mr. Randall had lots of company. He knew everybody that was in Antlers. Probably everybody that was in 25 miles of him. And
He may have built a house or had it built. I don't know.
I guess maybe he had it built. It was real nice inside. It just wasn't modern like the houses are today. But it was a nice house.
I think the Akerts built the one at Snow. I've heard them say. Seemed like that house cost $2,500 when they built it.
Lord, that wouldn't build a foundation today. Or he did live in it for a while, I know. But I mean, wonder why he didn't just want to remodel it instead of building a new house.